Adrienne from Myrtle Beach State Park, and we're going to have a 4-part video segment all about turtles.
We're going to talk about turtles today, and turtles are such amazing creatures. But before we talk more about them, let's figure out what kind of animal is a turtle. Is it a mammal? Is it a bird? How about an amphibian? A reptile or a fish? What do y'all think? Yeah, they are reptiles. And reptiles, there are 3 other types of reptiles in addition to turtles. Can you think what they are? 2 of them you might be able to see at Myrtle Beach State Park. The first one would be lizards. They're easily found scurrying throughout our woods. The other one, sometimes people are a little scared of them, but they're such important creatures. Yeah, they're the snakes. And the last one, we don't really have the proper habitat at Myrtle Beach State Park for this animal, but you can easily see them just down the road at Huntington Beach State Park. What do you think they are? Yeah, they're the alligators. So now we know the 4 different types of reptiles: the lizards, the snakes, the alligators, and our favorite, the turtles. Now we have to figure out what makes them different than mammals, birds, amphibians, and fish. What are the characteristics that makes them different? Can you think of any? The first one I want to discuss is what covers their body. Yeah, scales. So all reptiles are going to have scales on their body, and that helps protect them. The next one is, how do they have young? What do you think? Right, they lay eggs. And this is very different than the amphibians. They will lay eggs on land. So we're going to talk about sea turtles later on. And even though sea turtles live their entire lives in the ocean, they still lay eggs on land. It's just fascinating about their life stages. So how do reptiles breathe? Do they breathe with gills or lungs? What do you think? Right, they breathe with lungs. And again, go back to the sea turtles. Sea turtles live their entire lives in the ocean, but they must come up for air to breathe with their lungs. The last one we're going to discuss is their body temperature. Are they cold-blooded or warm-blooded? So we are mammals, and what are we? Right, we're warm-blooded, which means our internal body temperature is usually around 98.6. If we get a fever, if we don't, when we don't feel good, our body temperature goes up and we just feel kind of lucky. We don't feel really good. But reptiles, they're cold-blooded, or here's a big word for you, ectothermic. And that means whatever the outside temperature is what their internal body temperature is. So if we're cold and we go outside, we just put on a jacket. Reptiles, what are they going to do? Where could they go to warm up? Where could they go outside? How could they warm up? So think about it. It's winter out and it's really cold. What could they do? What do you think? Yeah, they could go in the sun. They could go underground. They could, sometimes in the winter, water is actually warmer than the air, so they might even be in the water. So those are a couple things that they could do to warm up. But let's go back to, like, say in July when it's really hot and we are sweating. The first thing we want to do is we want to go inside into the air conditioner, right? Or go and hit the nearest swimming pool or the ocean. So what can a reptile do to cool down? Yeah, it could go in the water, go in the shade, or again, go underground. Now that we know the characteristics of reptiles, let's figure out what makes a turtle different than snakes, lizards, and alligators. What do you think? That's right, their shell. Their shell is so cool. It helps protect the turtle, and it's very important. So let's discuss what makes up a shell. The top part of the shell is the carapace. Can you say carapace? The bottom part of a turtle shell is called the plastron. Can you say plastron? So now we're gonna say this together just so you get it in your brain, because these are some fun new words. Carapace, plastron. Carapace, plastron. Good job. So the other thing that's kind of neat on this shell is, remember we said all turtles have scales? And this is a special type of scale on a turtle. These scales are backed up by bone, and so they're called scutes. Can everybody say scutes? Scutes is kind of a fun word. So scutes. So on the flippers of a sea turtle, those are being called scales. But scutes are scales backed up by bone. Okay? So now, here's the hardest question. Are you ready? Is this shell the home or the skeleton of a turtle? What do you think?
homes and habitats a little bit later. But that means, can the turtle ever leave its shell? It can't. It's totally connected to it. So let's break this down. So the carapace is made up of rib bones. Where are your rib bones? They're right here. So this is a rib bone of a small sea turtle. Looks kind of cool, right? And there's this bump here. Think about what that might be later on, okay? So this is one rib bone. This is two rib bones put together. And then check out this giant rib bone from a large sea turtle. Pretty cool, huh? So I'm gonna bring up this small turtle shell. It's a diamondback terrapin. So we're looking at the underside of the carapace. And notice all the rib bones put together. They're all connected. And then notice the bumps that we mentioned earlier. All those bumps come to the middle of the carapace. And what do you think they make up? The backbone. Yeah, because reptiles are vertebrates just like us. And so we have the rib bones and the backbone making up the whole carapace. So we're going to review one more time. We have the rib bones making up the top part of the shell of the carapace, and underneath you're going to have the backbone. And so if you're walking along outside and you see a shell like this, what does that mean? Yeah, that means this turtle has died and left behind its skeleton. So there's one more thing we have to talk about of what makes a turtle different than all the other reptiles. What do you think it is? Yeah, turtles, they have no teeth. Alligators, snakes, lizards, they all have teeth, but turtles, they don't need teeth. They have sharp beaks that make them able to bite.
In South Carolina, turtles come in all shapes and sizes and eat a variety of different prey or food. They have different needs depending on their habitat. What's a habitat? It's the natural home of animals, plants, and other organisms. So now that we know what a habitat is, let's list some habitats in South Carolina where you might find a turtle. Are you ready? So this is an area that is fresh water and it's still water. It doesn't move. Can you think of it? It's a pond. How about, I love to ride down in a inner tube, down this freshwater moving body of water. Yeah, a river. We have this habitat here at Myrtle Beach State Park. Has lots of trees in it. Forest or the woods. How about a forest that is flooded with fresh water? Right, it's a swamp. This is a very important habitat for sea turtles, especially here at Myrtle Beach State Park. It's a hill of grass that's near the beach. Right, a sand dune. And then what's the body of water next to the beach that you love to go swimming in? Right, it's the ocean, and it's the Atlantic Ocean. And this last habitat that I want to talk about, you may not be real familiar with it, but if you visited Huntington Beach State Park, Edisto Beach State Park, Hunting Island State Park, Murrells Inlet, Pawleys Island, Hilton Head, they all have this habitat. We don't have this habitat here at Myrtle Beach State Park. It's low-lying, it has grass in it, and it's affected by the tides, which means the salt water of the ocean comes and goes in it. And the reason it's so important, how many of you love to eat clams, oysters, shrimp, fish, or crabs? If you love to eat any of those, you're going to find out that a salt marsh is a very important habitat here in South Carolina. Now that we've listed some of the habitats found here in South Carolina, I want to talk about a couple of the turtles we might find here. I'm going to briefly introduce 3 turtles that live in different habitats. The first one, what do you think it is? That's right, it's a box turtle. And box turtles, what habitat do you think it lives in? Correct, the forest habitat. And box turtles, they're amazing. They have a shell unlike the other 2 turtles we're going to talk about. Most turtles cannot completely fit inside their shell, and most turtles cannot close it up. But box turtles can. They can completely go inside their shell and close it up because they have a hinge on their plastron that enables them to do that. And that protects them if they're scared or if there's a predator after them. In fact, what predators do you think would be in South Carolina that might try to prey on a box turtle? I'm thinking raccoon, a coyote, maybe a fox. And maybe as an adult box turtle, they couldn't eat them because they're tucked inside their shell, but if they flip them over, what do you think will happen? Here's the cool thing. Turtles have a really long neck, really flexible, and their carapace is pretty rounded, and so they can flip themselves right over and get away. How cool is that? I think that's pretty neat. So also, let's look at their carapace again, and look at that camouflage. Don't you think they blend in really well with the forest floor? And those sturdy legs help them walk pretty well. And they have claws that will help them to maybe burrow under into leaves to get away from predators, or if it gets too cold. And also help them to look for food. And what kind of food do you think they'd find on the forest floor? Worms, insects, snails, flowers, fruit, and even poisonous mushrooms. They eat a lot of different things.
You may not have heard of this next turtle. Isn't it gorgeous? It's a diamondback terrapin. What habitat do you think they live in? It's that salt marsh that we talked about earlier. And diamondback terrapins are very different than the box turtles. They can fit inside their shell, but they cannot close it up. They don't have a hinge. Their beautiful camouflage shell, their carapace, blends in really nicely with the muddy salt marsh and all the vegetation in that same habitat. What do you think they eat in salt marshes? Yeah, they're gonna eat snails, crabs, and some clams. Many people know this next turtle. It's the snapping turtle. What freshwater habitats do you think we could find snapping turtles in? Yeah, ponds, swamps, and rivers. These turtles get pretty large. They can get to be about 10 to 35 pounds with a record of 75 pounds. And in addition to being large, they have a pretty ferocious reputation. Can you imagine watching this turtle lumber down, going from pond to pond, maybe to lay some eggs? And you know, with their flexible neck, they can lunge and snap. And so they rely on the fact that they're large and they're pretty aggressive. But in spite of being large and aggressive, they have a really small plastron. And so they cannot fit inside their shells at all. But their shell, their carapace, has great camouflage. Notice how dark it is? And that goes well with muddy bottoms or vegetated bottoms. And living in freshwater habitats, what animals do you think they prey on? They're pretty large, remember that? Yeah, almost anything they want, but snails, crayfish, insects, maybe some frogs, maybe some fish, even baby birds. We can help all the turtles I mentioned earlier by leaving them in the wild, keeping a watch out when we're driving along the roads, and not destroying or polluting their habitats.